Welcome back, everybody, to this deep dive on attention management.
Ah,
It's something that we all struggle with these days.
especially in the digital age, right?
Yeah, it feels like it's just an ever-increasing problem as technology keeps developing and there are more and more things vying for our attention.
Absolutely. And we have a great guide for this deep dive. We're going to be looking at the book Attention Management by Maura Thomas.
And that's really timely, I think, because a lot of the advice that we get,
Yeah,
is very much stuck in the old paradigm of time management.
right.
And it's just not that simple anymore.
No, it's not about how many hours are in the day. It's about how much of our attention we can actually devote to the things that matter.
And one of the things that I found really fascinating in the book was this idea that businesses are really fighting for our attention. You're using, almost like, I don't know, it's like persuasive technology is the way that she puts it.
Yeah, they're using all these little tricks and techniques to keep us hooked, to keep us scrolling, to keep us clicking.
So they're designing their apps and their websites and everything around that.
Absolutely, and they're getting very good at it too.
Yeah. And so she calls those diaper products. She says, they're so engaging that you don't want to put them down even for a minute.
Right.
Like you don't even want to go to the bathroom. You don't want to, step away for anything.
It's funny because it's true. Like, we've all had that experience where we're just glued to our phones, even when we know we should be doing something else.
Absolutely. So we need to become more aware of that, I think.
Definitely.
And she gives this great framework in the book called the four quadrants of attention. And it's a way of thinking about the different ways that our attention can be engaged or not engaged.
Right. And it's not just about eliminating distraction.
Right. It's about understanding when distraction is actually helpful.
Exactly.
So let's dig into those quadrants a little bit.
Mhm.
So the first one is reactive and distracted.
Mm.
And this is the one I think we're all probably most familiar with.
Mm.
It's that feeling of being pulled in a million different directions.
Mm.
Yeah, you're juggling multiple tasks. You're constantly reacting to emails and notifications.
And you're not really in control. You're just kind of at the mercy of whatever's coming at you.
Exactly. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have the flow state.
Ah, yes. The holy grail of productivity.
That's the one we're all chasing, right?
That's when you're completely immersed in what you're doing. You lose track of time. You're just totally in the zone.
You come up for air hours later and you're like, wow, I got so much done.
Exactly.
And then there's a quadrant for daydreaming, which is really interesting
Right.
because it seems counterintuitive. Like you think, oh, I need to be focused all the time.
But actually giving your mind a chance to wander can be incredibly beneficial.
Yeah, it allows for those kind of like creative breakthroughs and new insights to emerge.
And it can be very restorative as well, just to kind of let your mind decompress.
Absolutely. And then the final quadrant is focused and mindful.
Which is kind of like a deliberate form of attention.
Yeah, you're choosing what to pay attention to. You're resisting distractions. You're being present in the moment.
It's about being intentional with your focus.
Right. So it's not just about being focused all the time. It's about choosing the right type of attention for the task at hand.
Exactly.
So in this always-on world, where we're constantly bombarded with information and stimulation, what are the implications of this for us?
Well, one of the biggest implications is that we need to really rethink this idea of multitasking.
Well, multitasking.
We all think that we're so good at it, right?
Yeah.
But actually, it's a myth. It's a complete myth.
I think that's one of the hardest things for people to accept.
I know, but the research is very clear. Multitasking makes us less productive.
Yeah. In fact, there was a study from the University of London that found that multitasking can actually reduce our productivity by as much as 40%.
Wow.
And it also increases our error rate. So we're not only getting less done, but we're also making more mistakes.
It's because our brains are just not designed to handle multiple complex tasks at the same time.
Right? We're trying to split our attention, and it just ends up fragmented, and we can't really focus on anything properly.
And this constant state of fragmented attention, it takes a toll on our well-being as well.
Oh,
It
absolutely.
leads to burnout, it leads to exhaustion, and it can really stifle creativity.
It's like that feeling of being constantly switched on.
Yeah.
You never really get a chance to unwind or recharge.
Right.
And that's why Thomas advocates for something that sounds kind of radical in today's world.
What's that?
She says we need to turn off our devices.
Gasp.
I know it sounds crazy, right?
It does sound a little scary.
But just think about the benefits. Like, imagine if you could actually disconnect from all of that digital stimulation.
I guess it would be kind of liberating in a way.
Yeah, it would give you a chance to reclaim your attention, to strengthen your ability to focus.
And to actually reverse the erosion of our attention spans, which have been steadily shrinking thanks to all this digital stimulation.
Right, and I think one of the things that people worry about is like, oh, but what if there's an emergency?
Right. What if someone needs to reach me urgently?
Yeah, what if I miss something important?
And that's a valid concern, but there are ways to mitigate that.
Yeah, like you can set expectations with people.
Right. You can let them know that you're not going to be reachable 24/7.
And if there really is an emergency, there are other ways for them to contact you.
Exactly.
So it's about setting boundaries and realizing that you don't have to be constantly connected.
It's about taking back control.
Exactly. And it's not just about technology either. It's about managing your environment as well
Oh,
to
definitely.
minimize distractions
Right?
and create spaces that are conducive to focus.
So, what kind of things can people do to manage their environment?
Well, Thomas gives some really practical tips like using do not disturb signs
I love that.
or strategically using headphones to block out noise.
Noise canceling headphones are a lifesaver.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
then even creating quiet work zones.
Mm.
Even if you're in a busy open office environment.
Right. You can create your own little oasis of calm.
Exactly. And she even suggests using a little bit of humor with it.
Like what?
Like imagine a do not disturb sign that says something funny,
Oh, that's a good idea.
something that sets a clear boundary, but also makes people smile.
It's a good way to lighten the mood.
And another surprising culprit that she points to is clutter.
Clutter.
Yeah, she says that clutter can be a huge distraction.
I can see that.
And it's not just visual clutter either, it's also mental clutter.
Mental clutter.
Yeah, all those unfinished tasks and uncaptured ideas that are swirling around in our heads,
It's like our brains are constantly trying to process all this stuff in the background.
right? And it takes up valuable mental space and it makes it harder to focus.
So decluttering our physical space can actually help to declutter our minds.
Exactly. It's about creating an environment that nurtures our ability to focus instead of hindering it.
I like that.
But let's be realistic. Changing habits takes willpower.
Oh, yeah.
And willpower is a finite resource.
It's like a muscle that gets tired after a while.
Exactly. And the demands of modern life are constantly draining our willpower.
So what can we do to support our willpower instead of depleting it?
Well, that's where self-care comes in.
Ah, self-care.
Yeah, things like getting enough sleep, nourishing our bodies with healthy food, and engaging in regular physical activity.
Those are all so important.
Absolutely. And they're not just indulgences. They're actually investments in our ability to manage our attention effectively.
I think that's a really important point.
Because if we're running on empty,
Yeah.
if we're sleep deprived and stressed out,
It's much harder to resist those temptations and stay focused.
exactly. And then Thomas challenges us to question this belief that we have about busyness.
No, the cult of busyness.
Yeah, we often equate constant activity with productivity and worth.
Like we're afraid to slow down.
Right. And we wear our busyness like a badge of honor.
But is it actually productive?
That's a question, right?
Yeah.
Is it truly productive or is it just an illusion of productivity?
I think a lot of times it's the latter.
Yeah, I think so too. And she tells this great story about a client named Joe.
Joe.
Yeah. And Joe had just finished this big project. He'd put in a lot of hard work and he was feeling really good about it.
Good for Joe.
But then he got an email from his boss and he didn't respond to it immediately.
Oh.
And he started feeling guilty.
Like he should have been instantly available.
Yeah, even though he just finished this massive project.
That's so common though.
It's that pressure to be constantly on.
Like we're always supposed to be reachable and responsive.
And it's just not realistic or healthy.
No, it's not.
So we need to challenge those beliefs about productivity and realize that sometimes the most productive thing you can do is disconnect.
Take a break.
Step back from the constant flow of demands.
And engage in some deep, focused work.
Exactly. And that's something that we're going to be talking about more in the next part of this deep dive.
I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. So stay tuned.
See you then. Welcome back to our deep dive into attention management. So, in the last part, we talked about how our attention is constantly under siege in this digital age and how multitasking is actually a myth that makes us less productive.
And we also explored the idea of turning off our devices to reclaim our attention and create space for deep work.
Right. So now let's talk about some practical strategies for actually managing our attention.
Okay, so what's the first step?
Well, one technique that I found really helpful is setting a timer for brief intervals, like maybe 10 minutes, and dedicating that time to single tasking.
So you're basically saying just focus on one thing for 10 minutes straight.
Exactly. And during those 10 minutes, you eliminate all distractions. You put your phone on silent, you close your email, you find a quiet spot, and you just work on that one
And I
task.
imagine that can be really hard at first, especially if we're used to constantly switching between tasks.
Oh, it definitely can be, but the more you practice it, the easier it gets. It's like exercising a muscle. The more you train your attention span, the stronger it becomes.
So it's kind of like building up our mental stamina.
Exactly. And that enhanced capacity for concentration is what allows us to do deep work, to have those creative breakthroughs, to achieve meaningful results.
And along with those focused work sessions, what about incorporating some quiet time into our day?
Quiet time, that's another great one. And by quiet time, I mean actually sitting still without talking, without gadgets, without even the temptation to nap.
Oh, so just being present with our thoughts.
Well, it could be being present with your thoughts, or it could be just absorbing the ambience of your surroundings. The point is to give your brain a break from all the stimulation and allow it to wander freely.
And what's the benefit of that?
Well, it can be incredibly restorative, and it often leads to unexpected breakthroughs. Sometimes the best ideas come to us when we're not actively trying to think of them.
It's like our subconscious mind is working on things in the background.
Exactly, and quiet time gives it a chance to surface those ideas.
So how much quiet time should we aim for each day?
I think it varies from person to person, but even 5 or 10 minutes can make a difference.
Okay, and what about mindfulness? How does
Yeah.
that fit into all of this?
Mindfulness is a really powerful tool for attention management because it helps us to become more aware of our thoughts and emotions as they arise.
And that awareness allows us to manage them more effectively,
Exactly. And there are lots of different ways to practice mindfulness. You can do formal meditation, or you can just try to be more present in everyday activities.
like paying attention to your breath or the sensations in your body.
Right. Or even just noticing the sights and sounds around you.
So it's about cultivating a sense of presence in the moment.
Exactly. And the more we practice mindfulness, the better we become at regulating our attention and our emotions.
And that's a really valuable skill to have in today's world.
Absolutely. It helps us to navigate the complexities of our lives with more grace and ease.
So we've talked about single tasking, quiet time, mindfulness. What else?
Well, another thing you can try is incorporating some technology-free periods into your week, like going for a walk without your phone or having dinner with loved ones and leaving your devices in another room.
I can see how that would be really challenging for a lot of people.
It definitely can be, but it can also be incredibly liberating to disconnect from the digital world for a while and just be present in the moment.
And what about physical activity? How does that play into attention management?
Physical activity is actually really important for enhancing focus and attention.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Exercise increases blood flow and oxygen delivery to the brain, which helps to sharpen our mental acuity.
So even a brisk walk around the office can make a difference.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the physical benefits either. Exercise also helps to reduce stress and improve our mood, which makes it easier to focus.
That makes sense. And what about breaks? Should we be taking regular breaks throughout the day?
Definitely. It might seem counterintuitive, but taking short breaks can actually enhance our overall productivity.
So how often should we be taking breaks?
Experts recommend working on tasks for 25 to 90 minutes, followed by breaks ranging from 5 to 17 minutes.
And what should we be doing during those breaks?
The key is to engage in activities that allow us to genuinely disconnect and recharge. So things like moving our bodies, getting some fresh air, or just closing our eyes and resting.
So scrolling through social media probably isn't the best way to spend a break.
Probably not. It's better to choose activities that give your brain a chance to rest and process information.
So by incorporating all of these strategies into our routine, we're essentially creating an environment that fosters flow.
Exactly. We're setting ourselves up for those moments of effortless focus and heightened productivity where we do our best work and experience the most satisfaction.
But controlling our external environment and habits is only one part of the equation, right? We also need to learn how to manage our thoughts,
Ah, yes, the internal landscape. That's where things get really interesting.
because our own minds can be our biggest source of distraction.
Oh, absolutely. We're constantly bombarded with thoughts, worries, to-dos, ideas that we haven't captured yet.
It's like having an endless mental to-do list running in the background.
Exactly. And that's where workflow management comes in.
Workflow management.
Yeah, it's basically about having a system for handling all the demands on our attention, both professional and personal.
So instead of trying to keep everything in our heads,
We externalize it. We capture it in a reliable external system, whether that's a to-do list app, a physical planner, or even just a simple notebook.
and the key is to find a system that works for you and to use it consistently.
Exactly. And by doing that, we free up valuable mental space. reduce anxiety, and allow ourselves to focus more effectively on the task at hand.
So it's about quieting the mental chatter that can derail our focus.
Right. And that sense of control and clarity makes a huge difference in our ability to manage our attention.
Okay, so we've talked about managing our environment, our habits, and our thoughts. What about flow? How do we actually get into that state of effortless focus and productivity?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, eliminating distractions is key. But there are other factors at play as well. For one thing, the task itself needs to be challenging enough to engage our attention, but not so difficult that it becomes overwhelming.
So it needs to be in that sweet spot between boredom and frustration.
Exactly. And it also needs to be something that we genuinely care about. If we're not invested in the task, we're unlikely to reach that state of deep immersion.
That makes sense. And this brings us to the concept of seeking depth, which is something that you talk about a lot in your work.
Right. In today's world, we're constantly bombarded with information, and we often prioritize breadth over depth. We skim articles, we scroll through headlines, but we rarely take the time to really delve into any one subject.
And that superficial engagement prevents us from developing true expertise.
Exactly. It's like constantly snacking on junk food instead of savoring a nourishing meal.
So how do we cultivate depth?
Well, it takes time and effort. We need to carve out dedicated time for deep work, for immersing ourselves in a particular subject or project.
So things like reading books, having thoughtful conversations with experts, dedicating uninterrupted hours to a creative pursuit.
Exactly. It's about resisting the urge to constantly switch tasks and allowing ourselves to fully engage with a single topic.
And by doing that, we not only expand our knowledge and skills, but we also open ourselves up to new perspectives, insights, and breakthroughs.
Right. And as an added bonus, deep work often leads to those coveted flow states.
So it's a win-win.
Absolutely.
And in our quest for depth and focus, let's not forget about the importance of listening.
Ah, yes, listening. Another skill that's often overlooked in our attention deficit world.
Because truly listening to someone requires presence focus and a willingness to set aside our own thoughts and agendas.
Right. And when we listen attentively, we not only gather valuable information, but we also strengthen relationships, build trust, and foster deeper connections with those around us.
And there are different levels of listening, right?
Yes. Author Scott Eblin describes three levels: transient, transactional, and transformational.
So transient listening is that kind of superficial listening where we're not really paying attention.
Right. We're distracted, we're thinking about other things, we're not really present in the conversation.
And then transactional listening is more about focusing on the next step or finding a solution to a problem.
Exactly. It's functional, but it lacks the depth of true connection.
And then transformational listening is that deep level of listening where we're fully present and engaged.
Right. We're striving to understand the other person's perspective completely. We're not just waiting for our turn to speak, but we're actually absorbing their words and trying to see the world through their eyes.
And that kind of listening can be really transformative for both parties involved.
Absolutely. It can help to resolve conflicts, build empathy, and foster genuine collaboration.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive. We've talked about single tasking, quiet time, mindfulness, technology-free periods, physical activity, breaks, workflow management, seeking depth, and transformational listening.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But the key is to remember that mastering attention management is an ongoing journey, not a destination.
It's about consistently making small choices that prioritize focus, presence, and intentionality.
And it's about being patient with ourselves when we stumble.
Because we all stumble.
We do. But the important thing is to get back up and keep practicing.
And to celebrate our successes along the way.
Exactly. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into attention management.
And we've covered a lot of ground already, haven't we?
We have. We've talked about so many different techniques and strategies for improving our focus and productivity.
From single tasking to quiet time to mindfulness to technology-free periods.
And we even touched upon the importance of physical activity, regular breaks, workflow management, seeking depth, and transformational listening.
It's a lot to digest, but I think it's all incredibly valuable.
Oh, absolutely. And in this final part, we're going to be talking about something that's really crucial for putting all of these strategies into practice.
What's that?
Willpower.
Ah, willpower, the elusive key to self-control.
Right. Because we all had those moments where we've set an intention to focus, to resist temptation to make a healthy choice.
And then our willpower just crumbles.
Exactly. It's like we have this limited reserve of willpower that gets depleted throughout the day.
And the demands of modern life are constantly draining those reserves, aren't they?
They really are. You know, with the Constant distractions, the pressure to perform, the relentless pace of work.
It's no wonder we feel exhausted and depleted by the end of the day.
And it becomes a vicious cycle because we often sacrifice things like sleep and nourishment and exercise
Mm.
in the name of productivity.
But ironically, those are the very things that we need to replenish our willpower.
Exactly. It's like expecting a car to run smoothly without fuel or proper maintenance.
Our brains require the same care and attention to function optimally.
So self-care is not a luxury. It's a necessity for effective attention management.
I couldn't agree more.
And it's not just an individual responsibility either.
Oh, you're right. Organizations and leaders have a role to play as well.
Definitely, they need to create environments that support willpower and attention management.
So things like discouraging late-night emails, promoting healthy eating habits, providing opportunities for employees to take breaks and exercise.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that employee well-being and productivity are interconnected.
Absolutely. And when organizations prioritize both, everyone benefits.
Now let's talk about something that I think a lot of us struggle with,
What's that?
the glorification of busyness.
Ah, the cult of busyness.
Right. We live in a culture that often equates constant activity with productivity and self-worth.
We wear our packed schedules and never-ending to-do lists like badges of honor.
And we're afraid to slow down or admit that we have some downtime.
But is all that busyness actually productive?
That's the question, isn't it?
I think a lot of times it's just an illusion of productivity.
It's mistaking motion for progress.
And I think Joe's story really illustrates that point.
Joe, the client who felt guilty for not responding to his boss's email immediately after finishing a major project.
Exactly. He had accomplished something significant, but he still felt this pressure to be constantly on.
And that pressure is so pervasive in our culture.
It's like we're expected to be reachable and responsive 24/7.
And it's just not realistic or sustainable.
So we need to challenge those beliefs about productivity.
And recognize that sometimes the most productive thing we can do is disconnect.
Take a break, step back from the constant flow of demands.
And engage in deep, focused work.
It's about quality over quantity.
Impact over mere activity.
And having the courage to prioritize what truly matters.
Now, another factor that can really impact our attention is stress.
Ah, stress, the silent killer of focus and productivity.
Because when we feel overwhelmed, anxious, or pressured, our brains go into fight or flight mode.
And our attentional resources get hijacked.
Our focus narrows, our thoughts scatter, and we become more susceptible to impulsive decisions.
It's like that athlete who chokes under pressure, overthinking well-rehearsed skills, and ultimately performing below their capabilities.
Our brains are trying to protect us from perceived threats, but in doing so, they actually hinder our performance.
So how do we combat stress and prevent it from sabotaging our attention?
Well, first we need to acknowledge that stress is an inevitable part of life,
It's not about eliminating stress entirely.
but about developing effective coping mechanisms
Things like mindfulness, exercise, healthy eating habits,
and cultivating self-awareness
understanding our individual stress responses and triggers.
so that we can manage those responses proactively.
And sometimes the simplest yet most effective way to manage stress is to just step back and take a break.
Give ourselves time to reset and recalibrate.
It's amazing how much a little bit of downtime can do for our mental clarity and focus.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into attention management, I think it's helpful to recap the 10 key insights that we've gleaned from Maura Thomas's work.
Sounds good.
Number one, time management alone is insufficient. Attention management is crucial for thriving in today's world.
Number 2, businesses are actively vying for our attention, using persuasive technology and design to keep us engaged.
Number 3, mastering the 4 quadrants of attention, reactive, and distracted flow, daydreaming and focused and mindful, empowers us to consciously choose the right state for each task.
Number 4, multitasking is a myth that reduces productivity and increases errors. In fact, studies have shown that it can diminish productivity by up to 40%.
Number 5, constant distraction not only hinders productivity but also contributes to burnout, exhaustion, and diminished creativity.
Number 6, turning off our devices while seemingly radical is a powerful act of self-care that allows us to reclaim our attention's strength and focus and reverse the erosion of our attention spans.
Number 7, we have more control over our environment than we realize using tools like Do Not Disturb signs. Headphones, quiet work zones, and managing clutter can help to minimize distractions and create spaces conducive to focus.
Number 8, willpower like a muscle requires nurturing and support adequate rest. Nutritious food and regular exercise bolster our willpower, enabling us to make conscious choices about where we direct our attention.
Number 9, The glorification of busyness is a trap. True productivity is not about filling every moment with activity, but about achieving meaningful outcomes.
And number 10, stress can hijack our attentional resources, leading to poor decisions and hindering our ability to perform at our best. Developing effective stress management techniques is crucial for safeguarding our attention and overall well-being.
So there you have it, folks. 10 key insights into the world of attention management.
And remember, it's not about mastering all of these things overnight,
That's an ongoing journey.
a process of continuous improvement.
And every step we take towards reclaiming our attention brings us closer to living a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
Absolutely.
So as you navigate the complexities of this modern world, pause and ask yourself, where did my attention go today?
The answer to that question holds the key to unlocking your potential.
And creating a life that is truly aligned with your values and priorities.
Until next time, may your attention be guided by intention, clarity, and purpose.